Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here at the last session for the last day of what I personally think is probably the most epic conference that has happened. I haven't been to all of them, obviously, but that's what I'm thinking anyway. So, without further ado, welcome to Autistic Representation in Media. I'm Sheree Reed. I use they, them pronouns. Let's begin. So, again, I want to just welcome you guys. I'm really thankful that every single one of you is here and wanted to just have a bit more professional or personal development and enrich your lives by hearing about autistic experiences from autistic voices. I think that that is so powerful, and I really appreciate you taking that time. So just so you know what to expect for the next roughly 60 to 75 minutes that we'll be together. We will be learning or talking about what is representation and why I think it's important that we talk about it. We will be hearing specifically from autistic voices. So the observations that I'll be talking about today, or the opinions, reviews, all of those things completely sourced from autistic viewers all around the world, really, from my own like Twitter or platform or like Facebook groups, things like that. But just like I just want to emphasize that it is what autistic people want you or everyone to know about autistic representation. We are going to talk about some common autistic tropes or archetypes that you might see in media, whether they're like explicitly written as autistic or, maybe people just think that they are. But there's some common tropes that come up, and we're going to talk about how you can tell the difference between harmful stereotypes and helpful categorizations. And finally, I hope you will leave. I expect that you leave with a little bit of a toolbox for ways that you can make informed decisions about what you watch or what you engage in. If you're a parent like me, maybe what your kids watch or how you talk to them about what they might be watching. And then I just kind of want to throw out that idea of voting with your view, which means that we can really make a difference in the world that we see by choosing like the things we want to be in. You know what I mean? If you don't, it's fine. By the end of this time together, you totally will. So before we move on, just to make sure that you know enough about me to feel safe that I'm a credible source, I'd like to talk a little bit about my background. So I'm an artist first, poet, playwright, performer. I'm working on a novel. I take pictures on Instagram. I'm one of those people who just always wants to be creating. I do have a master's degree in theater and writing, directing, and performance from the University of York in England. The experience of going to grad school is how I learned that I was autistic, because it was very difficult. But it was super awesome. And I learned that I really need to be kind of in art to sort of be my best self. I am autistic, self-diagnosed. I've been autistic my whole life, but I am what's referred to as late diagnosed, which means I didn't really learn that I could explain how my brain works and all the problems that I was having, or the way I always felt kind of different, until I was like 26 years old. I don't really consider myself a social activist, but I think some might, and I appreciate that. But really, I share a lot of social justice memes, and I like to just really think about the fun ideas about the future that we could see. I think we live in a world where a lot of things are going poorly, but we can kind of create the world that we want to live in by engaging the way that we interact right now. And so my artwork is all about sort of speculating about what that world could be. And that informs a lot of my poetry and my novel work in the sci-fi and fantasy area as well. And then finally, and personally, I think the thing that most qualifies me to talk about representation in media is that my special interests include film, TV, social justice, early childhood development, and accessibility. And all of that just means that I have read a lot about all of these different ideas. So the point is, you're in good hands, and I hope we have some fun today. So that was a lot of information. Let's have a little bit of a brain stretch. This is a chance for you to kind of let your brain wander, but sort of in a guided direction. So I want to ask you to just think about, what was your favorite TV show as a kid? So I'll ramble. You can let your brain wander for a second. Mine was Power Rangers. And I kind of forgot that until the 2017 version of the film version came out, where Billy Cranston was the Blue Ranger and he was a Black kid who was autistic. It was canon in the film. And I bawled my eyes out in the cinema because I felt so seen. And I remembered so many things about watching Power Rangers as a kid. So that just kind of goes to talk about the power of representation and how really strong it is, especially my own experience. But while you're thinking about your favorite TV show, I want you to see what kind of stuff do you remember? What stuff lingers? Is it like certain phrases? Was it the races or the fact that there didn't seem to be any diverse people on screen? Do you remember if the mom was just a mom in the house, or did she leave the house and go to a job? I'm just trying to get us to start thinking about, what do we remember about the TV show we watched as a kid? Because that media really shapes our worldview from an early age. So now that's got us thinking about, what is representation? So when I'm saying representation in media, what am I really talking about? And there's a couple of like specific and explicit definitions, but they don't get to sort of the nuance of this topic. So for today's purposes, when I say representation in media, I'm specifically referring to whose stories are being told and shown, and then who's doing the telling of those stories. And that's the framework I want us to keep in mind. Another brain break. These are for me more than they are for you. But I have this cute poll that we're going to take, a sort of multiple choice question that I think Topher and our wonderful conference hosts are going to queue up for you all, and let me know what you guys think. But which character below is considered headcanon autistic? And here, headcanon is a word that means something that a fan imagines to be true about a character, even though there's no particular information supporting that belief in the text. So your choices are A, Dr. House from House, B, Miss Frizzle from the Magic School Bus, C, Abby from NCIS, or D, Daria from Daria. So I'll let us all have a little brain break for a second while we go through this question. Also, if you guys see me fidgeting, I have a little fidget that helps me stay focused during the presentation. So we're gonna just take a second to get some answers before I move on and spill. Let's see, should I spill the answer yet, or are we still taking answers? I'm excited to see what you guys think, because I'm not sure how many people even have thought about this. Okay, so I've got some results back from the poll. So 45% of you think that Dr. House is considered headcanon autistic. 16% of you are thinking Miss Frizzle from the Magic School Bus. 10% of you are thinking Abby from NCIS, and 29% are thinking Daria from Daria, which I think is really interesting that Daria is, second after Dr. House. I wonder if that speaks to the ages of people who are watching today. So let's see, I have to get back to my navigation. Okay. So the answer is all of the above. I did consider whether it was ethical to not put all of the above on the answer choice, but I decided we're here to have fun today, so I'm just going to go with it. All four of these characters are very highly considered headcanon autistic among viewers, like autistic viewers of TV show. And we'll talk a bit more about later about the traits that sort of makes that possible. But I hope that's already got you thinking about how there's kind of more going on here than you might realize. So here is a non-comprehensive list of characters who are explicitly autistic. So these are a few that I like. Of course, there's plenty more out there. Billy Cranston from Power Rangers, Julia the Puppet from Sesame Street, Max, I've got a picture of him from Daniel Tiger. Harlan from Umbrella Academy. Matilda, Everything is Going to Be Okay. Sam from Atypical. Dr. Sean Murphy, The Good Doctor. Dean from Claus, and AJ from Hero Elementary. And these, and I won't read all of these just for time, but a non-comprehensive list of headcanon autistic characters. So characters that maybe you've seen, would never have considered autistic, or maybe related to, but didn't know why. And here's some that just a lot of autistic viewers relate to and think are probably are autistic. Abed from Community, who I personally most relate to. Data from Star Trek. Dr. Bones from Bones. Bob and Tina, and maybe the whole family from Bob's Burgers. Beth Harmon from Queen's Gambit. April and Leslie Knope, another of my favorites from Parks and Rec. And Lilo from Lilo and Stitch. There is actually a really great article in the resource document I put together that kind of talks about why autistic people love Lilo from Lilo and Stitch. So again, we're still kind of talking about what autistic viewers want us to know about representation and setting the stage for all of that. So I've got a few quotes here from viewers who, just describing their experience with watching autistic characters on TV or film. Everything's Going to Be Okay really spoke to me. I cry a lot watching the show because I finally feel seen. Josh's journey with realizing he's autistic felt so familiar to my own journey, and I'm sure to many other adults who didn't learn they were autistic until later in life. To be honest, I just kind of avoid anything that has an autistic character as a main character because I've defaulted to it's going to be awful. The Good Doctor is one of the best portrayals I've seen, but it's not perfect. I feel that there's too many shows which focus on the parents and families' issues with having an autistic kid and that being a burden. I wish there were more depictions of women and non-white people. Community has the best autistic representation in mainstream media, in my opinion, partially because the show creator is autistic. Atypical on Netflix is really good. It's about an autistic teenager and his family. I also like that after some fails in season 1, they listened to actual autistics and hired more actors and staff on the spectrum. And The Good Doctor is nice too. Big Bang Theory is so bad, and they're so racist to Raj, and it's all the stereotypical representation, mostly cis white dudes. And even though they're all neurodivergent, they're cruel to Sheldon because of his social awkwardness. And I think you'll find sort of across just these few reviews is that autistic people do have strong opinions about how representation of us affects how they see themselves in the world, about how other people see them in the world, and about their ability to be seen, in media. I also really want to just point out Community. Again, the show creator is autistic, but he says he actually didn't even discover he was autistic until after the response from autistic viewers was so strong when they were saying, I really relate to Abed. My brain works this way. I've never felt so seen before. And that's how he discovered his own diagnosis. So let's talk about the common archetypes that are usually used to show autistic traits. Or I think it's more specific to say, when autistic traits are often represented in media and when autistic viewers say, okay, I feel seen by this, there's usually a few archetypes that are being used to display that rather than actually autistic characters or actually autistic people. So the most common archetypes that I've observed that we see that represent autistic traits are the alien. So think 7 of 9 or Data from Star Trek, or really kind of any character that comes from another world to Earth and has to learn how it works. So think Transformers and the Rescue Bots. And then again, the robot. So I think Data is more in that category of an android or a machine that has the opportunity to learn how humans work, even though they have no feelings of their own. One of my favorite, the Manic Pixie Dream Girl, which I think the most explicit example of this is Summer from 500 Days of Summer. And interestingly, Jess from the TV show New Girl, and they're played by the same actress, whose name I'm blanking on right now, but she's often described as quirky, which is something that happens for a lot of like assigned female at birth, or women autistic people who grow up not knowing that they're on the spectrum, but always felt kind of, oh, that's right, Zoe Deschanel, that felt, so yeah, really speaks to those people. And I grew up the same way, who always felt like kind of weird or quirky, or people were always like, you're so funny, you're so strange, I love the way your brain works, wow. But then that character or that girl is often then archetyped as being like ditzy, or like really rude, or, you know, flies into your life, blows your mind, and then leaves and crushes your heart because they have no feelings or something. Like there's this specific archetype of characters who are who are basically just undiagnosed women, like on the spectrum. And one of the other things I actually really like about, or think about, like with the Manic Pixie Dream Girl character, is that if you're familiar with the sort of 90s romance trope, that you come in and, you know, the girl has like glasses and she's really nerdy and she always carries a calculator. And then for some reason, there's like a bet where the hot jock guy wants to like give her a makeover. And so after she has, you know, contacts and long hair and is like doing strange things like going out and playing in the rain, which she normally doesn't do because she doesn't like the feel of being wet, like a sensory experience. I'm making up this story. That's not a real movie. But the idea is that genre of that character is often, I often feel like I related to them as an undiagnosed autistic person as well. And I just think it's interesting that we don't just let them be autistic characters in films. Of course, a very familiar archetype is the train-loving cis white man. So just some white man who really loves trains or schedules or buses or something. Or the kind of corollary to that, the unapproachable white male doctor or scientist. So think of Dr. House, The Good Doctor, Sheldon, and maybe even, and I'm blanking as well on the name from the Marvel universe, but the doctor with the hands. It's going to come to me in a second. But the point is, that is a trope that we often see. And one of the issues with this trope, and we'll talk a bit more later about diversity in general, but one of the issues with this trope is it means we often do not get to see any Black or brown people or female or non-binary people who also fall into that category. And then finally, and one of my favorites as well, is related to the alien trope, but the sort of otherworldly or fairy elf character who seems to be kind of magical for some reason, but sort of struggles in the world of humans to get by without their magic, or if they have to like, you know, like deal with their kind of human form or their human body on this planet. Okay. So why exactly do autistic people relate to those archetype characters, whether they've been implicitly or explicitly described as being autistic? So just kind of a grouping of some of the traits that we share or we feel seen by, is feeling outside of pretty much all groups. So a lot of autistic people really do experience that feeling of like, was I an alien who was dropped on this planet when I was born? Am I a changeling? Like, did a fairy family pick me up? Like, why do I not seem to relate to any of the other people around me? We'll often see special interests. So spouting off about some particular topic that you just absolutely love and you can't stop talking about it and get really excited and then nobody understands what you're saying. I have that all the time. One of the first times I learned the word vomit was from the film Mean Girls. And I think sometimes people think that like Lindsay Lohan's character in Mean Girls could also be autistic. And a thing she talks about at the very beginning of the film is like, oh no, this thing happens and you can't stop it, even though you know you shouldn't say it. It's right here at your mouth and you have to say all these words anyway. So that kind of relatable thing that we often get like made fun of for, or some, you know, people laugh about it. We tend to relate to these characters that are keen observers and never lie, or they feel really anxious or disdainful about lying if they have to do it. Characters who are often seen as sarcastic or rude or unempathetic, even though that's not true, but that's just kind of how they're perceived. We definitely feel seen by the characters that are social awkward or have social anxiety, because it's like, I don't know what to expect. I don't understand what's going on in the space. And then one that also really sticks out is characters that have a markedly unconventional way of thinking. So something about, and maybe the whole story is sometimes about, wow, this person, this character, this hero had this idea that no one thought would work and was always made fun of for it, but then they somehow did it anyway. So let's pause then. If I'm saying that the traits of these archetypes are traits that autistic people often feel seen by, then why am I saying we need different or more representation? Like, what is autism then? And I'm sort of asking us to dig a little bit deeper into the understanding of the autistic experience. And so a few key points that I always try to talk about when I'm talking about autism is that it's not a disease. Like, autism is not something that needs to be cured. It's not something that we need to fix or figure out how to get rid of. Like, it's literally just a different way of thinking. And if you've been to any of the other panels over the course of this week, you've probably heard a bit more about this idea that autism is a disability and that we're disabled by the structures of society and the systems of society the way it's built right now. But in a vacuum, or if you put a bunch of neurodivergent people together in a room, the systems that we build work for ourselves and they're not disabling at all. And so we have to start thinking about autism differently. And one of the ways that we can kind of get the overall consciousness to think differently with us is if we can change the representation of it in media. There's a spectrum of differences. So just having 3 or 4 or 5 archetypes that are usually still just kind of straight white men is absolutely not covering the experience of autistic people. There's a spectrum of differences. One thing that always kind of blows my mind is, even though I'm only one person, my sensory needs change from day to day. Sometimes I need lots of light pressure or light sensory activity, and sometimes I feel vastly understimulated and I need really, really heavy, like I need to be squeezed, by a heavy blanket or something. And sometimes I feel like I need a mix of both in one sitting. So we absolutely cannot claim that we know the autistic experience is just 1 or 2 or 3 things. And to that end, autistic people are not a monolith, so it can't and shouldn't be reduced to caricatures. I believe that a lot of nuance gets missed in media, which results in society as a whole being really misinformed about who we are, what we need, and what we're capable of. And that's always important to me, coming from the social justice aspect, and even sort of thinking about the policy aspect of, if it's become more normalized to see that autistic people who are just like people who exist, I think it's something like 1 in 68 people are diagnosed with autism, which is a pretty high number, or a pretty high ratio. If we just recognize that, like, maybe someone in this building is autistic, we might have less bright lights in the workplace, just as, like, you know what I mean? And I think we can start to get those types of accommodations more easily as we begin to really normalize, like, what does it mean to be autistic? So we talked about those common archetypes. And actually, I'm just going to pause for a second because you guys might need a break, and I definitely do. Okay, we talked about common archetypes. And so I want to kind of dig a little bit deeper into that and think about how those archetypes can either be harmful stereotypes, which I think of as things that emphasize othering. So the character traits that we might see, or the plot lines that we see that emphasize the othering of the autistic character or the autistic archetype character, versus the helpful characterizations, which are things that make it easier to relate to that character. Hold on, let me pause. There's a question. Isn't part of the issue that the characters have to appeal and be recognizable to a mainstream audience that is allistic and majority white, regardless of how unusual the characters might be? I think this is a good question. And I think that this is a question that often we would hear like studios and producers asking. And I always push back on that, because the only reason that is an issue is because we live in a society that values the dollar or profitability of something as higher than the people aspect. So some people might say that's an issue. And the short answer is it's really not. Like, there are people out there, the majority audiences, who actually really benefit from learning about and viewing people who are different than them. And that is actually kind of a broad point of my, and we'll get to it a bit later, but thinking about how, like you, each individual viewer can say, I don't want to be a part of a mainstream audience that is allistic. I'm choosing to change my audience requirement, and I'm choosing to ask and show the people who make film or who make TV that I want something different. And I'm going to talk about how we can begin to be those people as viewers a little bit later. So that was a great question. Thanks for asking. So harmful stereotypes, some of them are being described as like soulless, robotic. When you see scenes where the autistic character is given no autonomy, or they're not able to self-regulate. So, I carry around a little fidget all the time, but if a character in a TV show is trying to fidget and then their parent makes them stop, or, those types of things, we recognize that those are things that definitely do sometimes happen in the world and in the lives of autistic people. But when we're offering them to emphasize the othering, it becomes harmful and something that we want to either call out, avoid, start to change, or present in conjunction with further information. Helpful categorizations, on the other hand, are those things that make it a bit easier to relate. So when we see characters on TV, like autistic characters lining things up in a row, like I do that. Like my kid, that's how he plays. He lines up all his little cars in a row. I have like rocks and buttons and, all those types of things, which are sometimes it's seen as being like really strange and othering. I find it to be really mindful and relaxing. And I think a lot of autistic people do. And honestly, things like that are things that I think more people should do and should take into those kind of mindful activities. Think of like monks and nuns and things like that will often take time to just be present in the moment and do a specific activity. And we really want to see more of that. Like I feel seen by that. It's an active thing. And another thing I want to highlight, but I'll move on just for time's sake, is needing more time to understand social cues or needing extra explanations. Like that is a very normal part of the autistic experience as well. And we should normalize not rushing people or not shaming people if they don't immediately understand what's going on or if they have to learn new things. Personally, I think, again, something that all of society, whether neurotypical, neurodivergent, doesn't know, could benefit from is just the compassion of giving people the space to ask for the help that they need in interactions. So I have a clip here. I have two clips back to back that I'll play where I'll sort of talk a bit. Maybe if you guys have questions, we can pause after these clips as well. But that will show, I think, some of the differences between in real time, a harmful stereotype or a helpful categorization.
We have to fill these out.
Oh, I should say this is from The Big Bang Theory.
Describe illness or injury.
I dislocated my shoulder.
All right. And how did the accident occur?
You already know that.
Cause of accident, lack of adhesive ducts. Okay, medical history. Have you ever been diagnosed with diabetes?
No.
Kidney disease?
No.
Migraines?
Getting one.
Are you currently pregnant?
No.
Are you sure you look a bit puffy?
Change migraine to yes.
When was your last menstrual period?
Oh, next question.
I'll put in progress. Psychiatric disorders. List all major behavioral diagnoses, e.g. depression, anxiety, etc.
Oh my God, what the hell does this have to do with my stupid shoulder?
Episodes of subpsychotic rage.
Okay, so this clip ends with she basically says, can you please not be yourself and try to be empathetic and try to understand like my problem and my pain? And then Sheldon says, there, Sheldon's here, in a very kind of robotic type of way. And anyway, the point is, the thing that stands out to me about the scene is sort of the perspective of it, in that it frames Sheldon as like the problem or the nuisance or the inconvenience in the scenario, which, you know, is interesting and fine if you are from the point of view, like if the main character is the neurodivergent character who's maybe talking about their experience in the situation. But Sheldon is kind of the main character in the show. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not giving us what he might be feeling in that situation, or why it might be, you know, kind of awkward for him to be trying to help a friend and maybe not know what to say or what to do. The other thing is that I think plenty of autistic people would relate to the experience of when a friend is in crisis, you kind of go straight in logistics mode. And it's like, I'm taking a list, I'm checking it twice, I'm making sure we're taking care of all the things, because that is a way that our brains might work to sort of show care and show empathy. So I think framing that might rely on that would be a bit more mindful representation. Okay, I always struggle to move from the video to the next slide. Here we go. And this one is from Atypical.
What are you doing?
Going online to try and find a girl. The date.
That's hilarious. Okay, finish the sentence. I spend a lot of time thinking about.
Easy. Penguins. And
Oh. Sorry, I'm touching things I shouldn't.
especially, I'll say, chinstrap penguins. They're my favorite bird. But all 4 types of Antarctic penguins are good. Did you know early explorers thought that they were fish and classified them that way? Not birds. Fish.
Okay, I'm gonna put sports. Hey kids, what you doing?
Casey's helping me sign up for online dating, but she hates all my answers, so she's lying.
Wow. You're a little young for that. You know, I saw an episode on 2020. There's actually something called cat fishing, and it has nothing to do with fishing. Bye, Mom.
Do you think we should take another picture with Edison? You know, I read online that girls love animals. Maybe like this.
I think this might go quicker if you just leave.
So there are a lot of things in this scene that I personally like, because I think, again, they do a great job of kind of like explaining things that are true to the autistic experience, even down to at the end of this clip in Atypical, where he like holds his turtle and then like kind of struggles to smile, which is, I never realized a thing that I totally do. And I'm often like, I don't know how to smile. And I just go in pictures, and it's just kind of become a part of my personality. Like, Sheree is that person who over smiles, but for some people it's like or whatever, you know what I mean? And it's just like, that is just kind of a normal part of being autistic. And it's kind of cool how they, you know, chunked it in there. But again, for me, the kind of overwhelming thing that sticks out about this clip is we get to see from Sam's point of view the types of things that maybe would be annoying to him, or how he's confident that his methods or his choices are fine, but like maybe he'll deign to use Casey's. And it's not sort of that like, maybe I should be doing something else, or, you know, I'm a nuisance to these other characters. But I do want to point out that even for, you know, these 2 clips that we've seen today, even though I kind of grouped them into, one of them is maybe more harmful and one of them is maybe more helpful, there's nuance kind of almost frame by frame. And it's okay for there to be space for both in a show or a situation. Like, it doesn't have to be a hard and fast rule all the time. Let me move to my next slide just to make sure that I can, and then I'll take a question. Okay. What are your thoughts? Let me make sure I didn't miss any questions today. What are your thoughts on when a character is heavily coded as autistic or headcanon autistic, but writers or showrunners consistently deny it? That is a good question. Honestly, I think that it is fine to not have the like explicit, I think it's fine to not have like the explicit okay from writers or showrunners that a character is autistic or not. There's plenty of reasons they might, like maybe they are not autistic characters. I mean, autistic people themselves. And so they don't want to get caught in the PR storm of that. And interestingly, and I've put a link to this video in the resource kit as well. There's a document, a PDF with several links, and we'll get, into all of that later. But one of them is a video on specifically representation of neurodivergent characters in Star Trek. And in that video, she talks about how a lot of the characters that are not even considered, or she talks about how autistic people often feel more seen by characters who are not explicitly autistic because they are given license to be more organic and more nuanced characters. They're not usually like stuck into a box of the tropes or, those archetypes. And so by not explicitly saying it, sometimes showrunners are actually given a bit more flexibility to give a more true experience. I wish that, we could get past that a bit more, and that's why I'm here. But I think it's fine if that's where we are right now. So that actually leads right well into the next question of what is missing in current autistic representation. So I'm not saying that current representations are holistically bad and we have to start over from scratch. But I am saying that most TV shows right now that are either actively or inactively representing autistic people are kind of incomplete in an irresponsible way. And ultimately, I think the best way to fix this, and it's stories about marginalized people all over the world. So I'm very much an intersectional activist and artist because I am Black, queer, and disabled, and grew up poor, and they have like all of these lists of things that have put me into one marginalized category or, the next, but, and they're all kind of related together. So my activism often talks about all of it. And so all of the methods that we're talking about today can and should be used to support any marginalized group, not just autistic people. Anyway, if stories about marginalized people are being made, then the marginalized people in question need to be paid to make those same stories. And it's just because those are our lives. Like if everybody else gets to write stories about their lives, we should be able to write stories about our lives as well. We should be able to act in them, direct them, work on the set for them and all of those things. But not just because it's, the ethical choice, we would actually be getting better TV and better representation with much more nuanced characters. We would get to see things like how there's a bunch of different types of stems and not just, the normal ones, right? We would get to see autistic characters who are really funny and have a sense of humor rather than the character who kind of doesn't understand sarcasm or is not able to joke because they take things too literally. We would get to see the characters that are not always good at school or in academic settings, which would really normalize that for, kids maybe who grow up autistic and struggle thinking they have to be that genius character. And then we would get to see that autism comes with a whole host of other things. No one autistic, and I know you've heard this if you've been to any other panel, that if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. There's so much difference. There's so much variance, but we could see so many other types of characters and so many broader, more robust stories. And I think, that the world is always going to be better if we can have better movies to watch. So one movie, really it's a short film, I think it's maybe 5 minutes long, that the Pixar short film group did is called Loop. And I think it's a wonderful example of mindful representation. The Pixar team went out of their way to make sure they cast an autistic actress to play an autistic character, specifically a non-speaking actress to play a non-speaking character. They accommodated for her sensory needs. They went out of their way to accurately and mindfully represent this traditionally marginalized group by collaborating specifically with the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, which even that, by choosing a network that focuses on self-advocacy, went above and beyond a lot of organizations or other films who maybe partner with less reputable organizations. So I love that they were able to really do, the mission of the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, nothing about us without us, by bringing them in. So we'll watch a little on the next slide, clip of the documentary. It's Pixar, so obviously I can't show you, Loop here, but it's really good. If you have access to Disney Plus, please watch it. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's like a sensory wonderland. And we're going to just watch a little portion of the clip where they sort of talk about this process of having this mindful representation. Hold on, I'm going to skip ahead to a specific section. Oh, sorry.
A group of consultants from the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network who then were able to watch the film several times.
Sorry, guys. I keep thinking I can catch up on the questions during the clip,
and they
but I
were
can't.
able to give us feedback on what was working for them and what wasn't working for them. They also gave us really helpful insight into what our character Renee might be experiencing or feeling or thinking.
Stimming. We really need her to be stimming under that canoe because that's the thing that helps her to relax. So the more we learned about autism, the more all the filmmakers on the project were able to design the story in a way that reflected these experiences that we were learning about. So the camera, when you're in Renee's point of view, oftentimes is not making eye contact with Marcus because that's just something that's not comfortable for her. Sound can have a more overwhelming experience for her than it would for Marcus. So we put that into Renee's point of view.
Renee.
Renee's voiced by a young woman named Madison Bandy, who is autistic and mostly non-speaking. We found her through a neighborhood art center called Creative Growth.
We brought her on site, and we quickly realized that that was not the right environment for her. Too many people, too much distraction.
So we decided to record Madison in her home. That's a camera.
Very
This is a microphone. And then Vince has a microphone. Ready? We wanted to capture her natural voice. That face. Scared. How does it sound? The way that she uses her voice is so expressive. Maddie, if I'm a doctor and I'm going to give you an injection, what sound do you make? If you're a person who doesn't know Madison and she starts vocalizing next to you, it's actually very hard to understand what she's saying, which is the point of the film.
So I love that clip because it so succinctly describes kind of everything I'm saying so far. Okay, some questions, which I think are really good. So I'll pause to get to them as well. Sorry, just trying to. Here we go. Isn't leaving a character's canon autism as a matter of interpretation the same thing as queer baiting? And then, fine, this character shouldn't be responsible as a representation ambassador, but then isn't potentially problematic representation better than no representation? And there's a follow-up, I'm not sure if it's the same person or not, who says, and if the problem is not enough neurodiversity in the writer's room, then let that be the next problem to solve, I think. It raises the questions, would there be a Blackish if there had been no good times? And I absolutely love this. I think that second portion is really kind of the answer that I would say, and that we loved watching Good Times as kids. And there were certain things that they couldn't do or say during Good Times that we can do or say during Blackish now, because it's been, I don't even know how many years between the two, but several decades, and the times have changed a bit. I am always trying to push boundaries all the time because I think go all the way or just don't do it. But I recognize that that is the reality that I live in and not the reality that everyone else lives in. And sometimes, unfortunately, it is a little bit revolutionary to compromise when you have to. But that doesn't mean that we should allow or be comfortable with queer baiting, I think we should, or with this kind of specifically with the autistic idea, I don't think that we should like rest on our laurels and let it happen. I think we should definitely push back. But I think that, I guess I'm thinking about people who are sort of watching. So autistic characters who might be watching, are they being seen? Are they still getting the representation that they need? And if so, like, how can we support in that way? While at the same time thinking about, are our writers in rooms being diverse enough? Are the production companies being diverse enough? And ultimately, the only way that we can really start to get the change and representation we want to see kind of all the way down is when we are allowing the marginalized groups to be at the top of the food chain. So the CEO signing the checks, making the decisions. That's when we're really going to start to see this, I hate to use the phrase trickle down, but that effect of things changing across the board. So it's kind of like a problem that has a bunch of different angles that it can be approached. And I think it's important to educate ourselves on all of the angles and kind of know where you fit in, because some people might be able to help in one area and some people might be able to help the other area. Both gears have to be working to get the wheels turning, if that makes sense. Okay, let's get back to the next slide. I'm using two screens, which I don't normally do. So my cursor keeps getting lost. Here we go. So now let's talk about the fun stuff, the actionable portion of this presentation. What can you do about representation of autism in media? I like to categorize things. So I've come up with the 6 S's. Which will help us be able to take ownership for our ability to cause change. If there's anything I want to make sure you get away from this, is that you all by yourself can cause even a little bit of change. You can get a ripple starting, and that's what it takes. So here are some steps you can take to start doing that. First, surround yourself with different voices. So whether that's your friend group, the people you talk to at work, your social media, whatever it is, open up your echo chamber. And ways that you can do that, and there's even more kind of examples and a couple recommendations on the starter kit. But follow different accounts. If you don't use social media the same way, there are blogs you can read. You can go onto a few people's website and pages and sign up for their newsletters. And every so often you get a blog to your account that will kind of talk about different experiences and different voices. There's hashtags you can use. All of these things that you can start to curate the world you want to see. If you think you should live in a diverse world, surround yourself with diversity. That's the base thing you can do. It takes almost no effort from you, but it will start to change how your mind works or thinks. The second S is C. So specifically in this case, we're talking about autism representation. Learn how to recognize harmful and hurtful tropes so that you know what you're seeing, so that you can pause and say, like, actually, this kind of makes me uncomfortable, or actually, I don't want to watch this anymore. And I hope that no one else gives them gives them any money. The third S is search. So before you start to spout off about what you've seen, first see if anyone else has already spoken up about it. Is a specific TV show connected with red flag groups or symbolism? You can do a quick search, and I'll give examples later, but did they use autistic characters? Writers or actors in the show or performance? Like, you can start to take active engagement to how you interact with the media. You don't have to just watch whatever it is. You can ask some questions first. The third is say. So learn how to start saying out loud how let me back up. So it says, tell a friend why you don't watch certain shows or films and offer alternative recommendations instead. But the sort of active part is that you can practice that. And we'll do that today. We can practice just like saying one sentence that maybe you go to that's like, actually, no, I'm not interested in watching this because I don't support it. And then the more you practice it, the more you can use that kind of wherever you go, whether it's at home in your living room with a friend, or if someone's airing it like at a bar on a Friday night or something. Like, feel comfortable being able to say something. And then after that, shout. Like, use your platform whatever that may be. So again, it could be you at the water cooler at work. It could be you on Twitter to 100 followers or 10,000 followers, whatever it is. We all have people who are influenced by the things that we say and do. So we can start to call out publicly when networks or channels, showrunners, etc., are perpetuating harmful information or misrepresentation and things like that. They don't get to do it in a vacuum. We, the consumer, the customer, we're the people that they're making content for. And if we don't pay them to make more content, they can't, right? So they should know how we feel about it. We can consider ourselves like stakeholders in society. And finally, support. So it's not enough. It's a good first step to surround yourself with different voices, but you need to use your privilege to support those people. So support the artist by buying from them directly or subscribing to their channels or newsletters or whatever it is. Find ways to uplift voices of the people that you are starting to see and learn from. If you follow some Black or queer or Indigenous people on social media, make sure that you're uplifting their voices, sending money their way, like moving those resources around, because we have hundreds of years of colonialism to try to like dig our way out of before we can really live in a world where we have the equity that we want. And again, don't forget that all of these steps, you can use them to support any marginalized group, like not just autistic people. It doesn't matter. Just sprinkle some voices into your echo chamber. So all art is subjective. Things that I like, another autistic might not like. Things that I think are fine, someone else might disagree with, and that is fine. That's sort of the nature of art and the nature of humanity. But there are a few, I think, hard and fast rules that we can say, this is a no, absolutely not, turn it off, cancel it. So if an episode or TV show, or, broadening our scope in a bit more, like a psychological study, is including or advocating for lack of removed autonomy for an autistic person, probably not a good look. If they're seeing or supporting restraint or being forced to stop stimming, like sometimes we think of the kind of dramatic, like trigger warning, but the like a straight jacket or that kind of thing as like, oh no, we definitely shouldn't allow that. But even something as small as, a person is like tapping their fingers and then, someone yells at them like, can you please stop doing that? That happens and it is sort of less than ideal. And then if they are including or advocating for isolation, that's probably a no. And then to take it a step further, like if there's no autistic creators involved, that's kind of where I'm at now. In my own life, like when I'm choosing TV shows to watch, if there are like no Black people involved at all, I'm like, I just don't want to watch this anymore. I want to make sure that I'm giving my time. I don't have a lot of time to watch TV. So when I do, I want to support the creators that I want to make sure we're seeing more of. I'm trying to like direct my dollars or, vote with my view. I'm trying to direct that energy in the way that I want to see it go. Obviously, blackface, hard no. But I think an even sort of softer hard rule, if I can say that, is if something is happening that's making you uncomfortable, or it makes you think like, I wouldn't want that to happen to me, or I wouldn't want it to happen to my kids, then it's probably not a helpful representation of an autistic experience. Like autistic kids are kids. If you don't want it to happen to your kid, you definitely don't want it to happen to an autistic kid too. Ooh, this is a question that says, how do you encourage verbal stimming when you have auditory sensitivities? I love this. So I use earplugs, loop earplugs. I only just got them a couple weeks ago. They've kind of changed my life, and they're really good for verbal stimming because the like internal sound is different. And so it's like, wow, 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 or whatever the sound might be. Speaking of, you can probably hear my kids scream stimming in the background. I'm just gonna try to ask them to be quiet. But a lot of verbal stimming doesn't have to be about like super loud. It can be about like the tactical, like teeth, mouth, like this sort of whole instrument. So I'm a performer as well. And actually a lot of the information that I know about how stimming is good for the brain comes from the like artistic practice of like warming up and that kind of thing. So I very much agree that like this whole kind of mouth instrument is great for verbal stimming. Anyway, so if you're asking to encourage like for other kids or for yourself or whatever, I would say play around with like covering your ears or wearing headphones or something like that, and then like being loud or changing up to do like ticking, like something tactile that's not just like a sound thing. And then if you can, starting to do things that might be like vocal warm-ups, like lips, teeth, tip of the tongue, and that kind of thing, which are just really fun. And I could talk about that all day, but that's actually not overall the scope. So I'll get back and focused. Okay, so when you're going through the 6 S's, please just remember that Google is free. You can just Google anything. Like there's no one watching you saying like, hey, you looked up too much stuff today. All the information is available to you. Use it. We're getting close to the 15-minute mark. This is possibly the most important thing in my presentation. There is a film called Music. It was written by Sia. I don't want to waste airtime talking about that catastrophe, but Google it. This documentary, short film made by and with non-speaking autistic people was made as sort of a direct response to that movie Music. And I think that it very broadly encapsulates, again, everything I'm trying to say here. So let's skip ahead to the portion of the clip.
A little more from time to time. People have a lot to say about us. They write stories and biographies. They produce plays and make movies about us. But they are not listening to us.
Just because I cannot speak does not mean I don't hear. I hear everything people say to me or about me. I may not show understanding in my face, but I know and understand. Not a word said escapes my so strong ears.
We may be non-speaking and need help with many things, but that doesn't mean we can't contribute to a book, a play, or a movie. If you always leave us out, people think we are not able to participate. That's why most people don't realize that we have a contribution to make. Include us, and you will see that we have so much to give.
To anyone who wishes to represent non-speaking people, I ask that you communicate with us directly. As representation of non-speaking people leaves us more vulnerable to abuse.
I should not be left out of conversations or presumed incompetent, simply because I don't rely on spoken language.
There needs to be more representation of diverse autistic identities.
The media often shapes how we view ourselves and how others around us view and esteem our place in society. When there is lack of representation or improper representation, it directly feeds into the internalization of stigma, where your membership in a group is the very cause of your negative self-esteem, feelings of inferiority, and even feelings of self-hatred.
So in the starter kit resource pack that I have, there's a couple of articles kind of related to this as well that just talk a bit more about the firsthand experience of being like a non-speaking person. I'm not a non-speaking person, but I do often have like nonverbal or in moments of distress kind of selective mutism as well. So I definitely understand that it is something that we need to talk about as being a more normal thing, because a lot of people, myself included, would benefit from kind of societally widespread accommodations in that direction. Let me see if I can click to the next. Someone asked, what's the name of this video? It's called Listen. There is a link to it in the starter kit pack as well. So now that we kind of understand what is not great in representation, what's kind of missing, what other stuff do we want to see? What would a great representation of the autistic experience look like? It would be so varied and diverse and, robust and nuanced, like I've been saying. We would see fun or joyful, silly, romantic action stories. Autistic people have widely varying interests, just like everyone else. Life is more than just pain and discomfort. There's a lot of fun stuff going on. I just like to talk about fun. We'd also want to see sexuality, gender, racial diversity. Autistic people are more likely to be LGBTQIA plus than neurotypical people, but we're not necessarily seeing that in the media. Or think about when's the last time you saw an Asian autistic person on TV? Like, it's not just white boys in America who are autistic. We're all over the world. It's a neurotype. It's just a different way of our brains being wired. And a big one, I think, is normalize aid and accommodation. So stories that are not just about like the struggle of trying to figure out how to move in the world, but that those accommodations are just kind of part and parcel. They're just a part of the life that a person is living. Like, you wake up, you eat breakfast, you brush your teeth, and you put your braces on for mobility and you go about your way. It's just part of the montage, if that makes sense. Want to normalize that a bit more. Okay, so let's practice. Take a break from all this thinking. You can have a moment to yourself and think about, if you're watching TV with a friend and there's a scene with like dubious portrayal of autistic people, what can you say? What would you do? And if anyone has like an example of this, maybe that they want to mention or share in the chat or something, like, feel free to do so. And while we take this brain break for one moment, I'm just going to mute me because my kid has made it to the door. Thank you so much. So you're watching TV with a friend. There's a scene with like a dubious portrayal of autistic people. What can you say? Literally something as simple as this little script, like, oh, this looks like it's maybe a inaccurate portrayal or a negative portrayal or a harmful portrayal. Let's watch something else. And I think on the flip side, I think it's also helpful to kind of steer the world in the direction. So even positive feedback is really good. Like, I noticed this show is really been praised by actually autistic voices on Twitter. So I'm excited to give it a try, and just starting to kind of talk about these changes that we're making in our own life so that it just gets a bit more normalized with the people we interact with. So the most important takeaways are that you have to take ownership for your ability to cause change. Don't just think that like someone else will do it, or you're not an activist, you're not one of these voices. Like, literally the little interactions that you have every day make a difference. I like to think of it as kind of sending out good energy into the world, and that energy really goes somewhere. Intersectionality, right? Disability rights are Black rights, are gay rights, are trans rights. Like, it's a circle. All of these people are impacted, and often the most marginalized people in our community really sit at the intersection of more than one of those areas. And so we have to kind of start thinking about that as we are making ourselves more aware of disability rights. It makes sense to go ahead and be more aware of Black rights or Indigenous rights and all of those things. We're all kind of in the same fight for justice and equity. We're not fighting against each other, but we're fighting against the system that was built to uplift a specific group and oppress literally everyone else. So we have to start thinking about that as we're digging our way out of that hole. And then, of course, remember, I made it small to pretend it was less controversial, but you're on stolen land. Black lives matter. Trans people are people. And in order to really move forward in an equitable society, we have to abolish the police. So I am ready to take questions, more questions. Thanks again. Thank you for being here. I am like all over social media. I love to talk about my special interests. That's where I do it. So you can use my name. And I think these links are also in that kind of handy resource kit. But you can follow me on social media. I have a Patreon where I talk about lots of these ideas. and all of that stuff. I'm an artist, so I'm always creating art and writing and, poems and everything as well. And while I wait for the questions to come in, I will give a little bit of a plug for the resource kit that I mentioned. There's a PDF that I think will be sent out to all the presentations. It's like 2 or 3 pages long, full of links. So the clips that we saw today, some that we didn't see today, as well as like there's this really, really handy, oh yeah, they posted a link in the chat. So there's this really handy Google folder. I honestly don't know where it came from, but it's got all of these resources about like being an autistic person. So if maybe throughout this conference, you're thinking like maybe I'm autistic, or if you're already thinking you're self-diagnosed, but you want a bit more information, there's some excellent resources in there. And I especially want to shout out one that is like a checklist for assigned female at birth autistic people, because we know like they tend to go more often undiagnosed because we just haven't been getting a lot of that information. So that checklist has helped me, a lot of my friends, and is especially useful if you, related to the manic pixie dream girl archetype. So wait for some questions to come in. Yeah, follow me on Twitter. Thank you. Please do. I have a lot of jokes on Twitter. I like to think of myself as a virtual performance artist, which is literally just me yelling jokes into the vacuum. Question, resources for autistic college students needing accommodations. That's a good question. And I actually do not know. I did not know that I was autistic in college. I would say find a trusted adult. So if you're like a college student and you need accommodations or whatever, find a trusted adult, like your favorite professor or whatever, and just start talking to them about the things you need or you realize you need. And they will almost always be able to help you. Especially for like my experience was being a student of color at a PWI. And a lot of times the resource people on campus, the people who work, either in the janitorial staff or the food services staff and those kind of things tend to be really knowledgeable. Tend to be really knowledgeable about like the inner workings of the school and just sometimes offer support for things like honestly, I was a really poor college student. I had a dining service person who kind of used to just let me go into the dining services. So sort of thinking about people as resources as you're trying to figure out the system of getting accommodations. That would be my advice there. Someone says, friendly note, not only are AFAB folks hit all the notes on that checklist, many AMAB non-men, along with some cis men do as well. And that is a good point. Thank you for that call out. Oh, Felicity, as a female autistic screenwriter, thank you. This is so important to share. I love that. Follow me so we can be friends. I love to talk to other autistic artists and screenwriters and playwrights about how we can collaborate either on sort of praxis, philosophical ideas, or actual projects. But yeah, we're out here and we should be making more work. Like we should be working together because the world needs to hear our stories. Just waiting for more questions. I'm trying to think if there was something else I wanted to say, but like got through the whole presentation. I thought, I'm a person who talks a lot. I thought we would bust over time. Oh, I hear that there's lots of thank yous and loving yous come in. Thank you. I'm so glad that you guys are here. I don't know, maybe other people as well. I have, as you can hear, 2 small kids at home. So I will be catching up on a lot of the panels later. So I haven't watched them all yet, but I assume that other people have probably talked about this experience of getting to present on a special interest or something that you're kind of deeply involved with or deeply care about. So it really is a pleasure to be here. And because, my partner gets tired of me talking about, did you see this representation? And he's like, okay, yeah. Okay, here's another question. Would someone explain headcanon? Sure, headcanon. Headcanon is sort of like a meme. The idea that it came from people who wrote fanfic or fan fiction. So let's say you read Harry Potter, you really liked the characters, you write your own kind of Harry Potter story that's in the world of Harry Potter using the names and characters that everyone knows, but you might create your own little side stories or your own side missions using the canon or the written in the text information about those stories. And so headcanon is just the word used to sort of describe those things. So I'm trying to think of an example, but I will leave space because we're almost out of time if there's other questions. But yeah, so for instance, Miss Frizzle, headcanon autistic, they don't say she is, but she is so strange and quirky, but in a good way, loves, science, has interesting ideas, all of those things. And it feels like that seems like par for the course. Current favorite show with good autistic representation. This is a good question. I really enjoy Atypical. I felt very seen when I watched it. Interesting characters. There's actually a lot of shows on this list that I want to get to watching. So I kind of go through periods of watching and then like making work, and I'm in a making stage right now. But I would say I definitely enjoy Atypical. And I honestly, to use another headcanon, I really love Bob's Burgers because I think that it has kind of so normalized this family that clearly has a lot of neurodivergencies going on. But instead of being like really dysfunctional, they just seem to have fun and like really love each other. So I appreciate that. Oh, can you tell us about your book? I have been waiting my whole life for someone to ask me that. So I have two books. I actually have one out that is a poetry book. It's called Prayers and Pixies. And I write poems to commission. And so it's sort of a collection of those commission poems and some other ones I had written that I think of as sort of word sketches for the world of the novel that I'm writing, which is in a universe where the series is called Books of Truth. It takes place 100 years in the future. It is very kind of steampunk meets dystopian meets Afrofuturism meets like autistic superheroes. And that is all I would say. I've kind of developed this thing of not talking about the plot at all and just enticing people and then dropping all these other nuggets. So if you're interested, you can buy Prayers and Pixies. It's like you can pre-order it right now. Also, like I have a published book, you guys, that's crazy. But I write a lot about my novel and the practice of writing, like the art practice of writing, and how that informs my kind of social justice and mindfulness experience, and like search for just how to make the world a better place. I talk about a lot of that on my Patreon. How do I respond to people who say I can't be autistic because it's not always obvious and you're self-diagnosed? I don't think you have to respond to them. I mean, you can definitely like practice some cool burns for people who don't get it, but also like, how would they know? Either they're autistic and their opinion doesn't matter, or they're not autistic and their opinion doesn't matter. Self-diagnosis is so important because it means that now you can give yourself permission to make accommodations that you need in your life. So yeah, I guess I would just say thanks for that unsolicited opinion and move on. Last minute. So if another question comes in, ooh. Okay. What's your take on neurotypical folks portraying neurodivergent folks? Stop doing it. It was cute. A lot of us are actors. Hire us instead. How do I illustrate my book? I have not yet. So if you want to talk more about it, find me on Twitter or Instagram. Let's see, I wonder if one or two more are coming in before our time is officially up. I've had a lot of fun and I love the like energy coming from the questions, even though I can't kind of see all of the chat and everything. I love to interact with people and hear more about their life experiences. I'm always just trying to like build a deeper understanding of the world by just getting to have relationships with more people. So definitely follow me if you can, and let's talk more there.